go ahead and get started. So first of all, I hope everyone had a good spring break. I'm sorry that I missed my training before that. I was pretty sick. I was in the hospital for a few days, and just so you know, I still don't have my hearing back. So to me, it sounds like I'm shouting. So if I start talking too low, just let me know. And I might have to ask you to repeat yourself if you ask a question. So it's not that it's not a good question. It's that I can't hear you. So how we're going to do this today? We're actually not going to do a quiz. I heard that. So this is how it's going to work. First, we're going to review the quiz that we took a few weeks ago. So we're going to review that. You have that in front of you. And then we'll do the SOCs. And then we're going to dive right in. And what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at degree evaluations. And it's really going to be, the reason there's not a quiz is it's a continuation of what we started to do. So we started to personalize the map based on having the catalog and having the personal information sheet. So we were really just personalizing the map for enforced registration, and if a certain course was listed, we were using the catalog to look at prerequisites. But now we have all of the puzzle pieces together with the degree evaluation. So once we go through the degree evaluation, we learn how to read it, learn how to use it. That's when we really start to put everything together. So based on how this part of the training goes, we're going to kind of decide what's going to be happening next week. So I'll give you a little bit more information in about an hour, depending how this training goes. So with that, let's go ahead and just review the quiz real fast. Everybody did really well on it, so I'm going to just kind of speed through it. So this is quiz 5, and it was about major and minor requirements. So number 1, these are true, false. Number 1 was all new students are admitted into a pre-major and must complete all impaction requirements, including major preparation, in order to declare the upper division major. True or false?
True.
True. Number 2, there are certain majors that require an improved study abroad or international experience.
True.
True. Declaring a minor is never necessary or required. It is solely up to the student if they want to declare a minor or not.
False.
That's false. Completion of a minor is necessary if it's required by the major. And every major has a major page in the catalog that lists the requirements for that major, including the impaction requirements.
True.
Multiple choice of the following which is not true about preparation for the major. A. Some majors do not require preparation for the major courses. That is not true. Every major requires prep. Now, some majors have a very limited amount of prep, like sociology, for example, or philosophy, while other majors like kinesiology have 50 plus units of prep. So it really depends on the major, but every major has prep. And then which of the following is true? Number 6, it's D, all of the above. So everything listed there is true. Short answer, Alicia is a Spanish major. So I asked how many units are required in the upper division Spanish major. It's 30 units, and that's found on page 439 on the Spanish major page. For those of you that answered 40 or 45, remember there's a difference between how many upper division units are required for the degree and how many upper division units are required in the major. Okay. So if I say for major, then you want to go to that major page to find that information. And then does a Spanish major require a minor?
Yes.
Yes, it does. And then I asked for at least 2 impaction requirements for the recreation and tourism management major. Mainly, I was just making sure that you knew where to go in the catalog for the major page and then how to find the impaction requirements. So the 3 answers are complete prep for the major, complete the minimum of 60 units, have a minimum GPA of 2.3. Any questions on that? Okay. So let's move on. Okay, so this is the last Wacky Sock Wednesday. I know, I was really bummed out in the hospital. I even said that. I was like, but we're missing Wacky Sock Wednesday. No one in the room caught the music. All right. So does anyone remember the first week of socks who the artist was?
Sorry.
T-Pain?
Coldplay.
Coldplay. So I decided to stay within the theme. Tupac was the second one. So we're going to stick with the theme.
I'll do better, I swear.
Make a Dunkin' run for a $2 pick-me-up after the afternoon crack.
We got one for John.
Sorry, John. It's okay. Get a $2 medium cold brew from 2 to 6 p.m. New delicious chocolate cherry. America runs on Dunkin'.
The legends and the myths, Achilles and his gold, Achilles and his gifts.
So they're Batman and Robin.
Let's control, Batman and his fist. Clearly
They have
I
little
see
capes.
myself upon that list. She said, where'd you wanna go? How much you wanna risk? I'm not looking for somebody with some superhuman gifts, some superhero, some fairy tale bliss, just something I can turn to, somebody I can kiss. I want something just like this. Oh, I want something just like this.
And just as a reminder, I will have the week. I'll probably put it on the final or have it as a separate handout, and you'll just vote for what your favorite was. Okay. So now we're going to switch gears. So in front of you, what you have are 2 degree evaluations. The top one should be management, and then the next one is mechanical engineering. These are both for freshman students. So we're going to go through this page by page, and then we're going to go through a couple where we look at a schedule and we're putting it all together. So we're going to finish personalizing a map now that we have all the tools. The first thing I want to point out, oops, and this was a good question from earlier. So how many of you have looked at your new degree evaluation? Good, it's a lot of hands. For those of you that haven't, and if you, as long as you have access to your degree evaluation, you definitely should jump on and take a look at it. A lot of work went into the programming. It's a much cleaner version. It's similar to the original, where it's color-coded, but it's just a little bit nicer looking. It's a little easier, I think, to read. For current students, it's kind of cool because you can run what-if options. So if you wanted to look at a different major, it'll plug your classes in as applicable. It also has an option where you can look at in progress, which is kind of cool. So instead of just, like if you're looking at the printed copy of the degree evaluation, it doesn't show you how the courses that you're registered in are working towards your degree. So it's kind of a cool function that you can now run it in progress. And really keep track of it. Do you have a question, Grant?
Yeah, so Tiana and I can't like sign in to ours. So
Okay.
do you know like what the deal is? Because it's obviously a different password or something. Do you know what password? The ad.
Yeah. So
We have to go off the ad.
so what do you do?
No.
No, you don't. So mine looks a little different, but bear with me. Here, I'll show you. Mine looks a little different than what yours looks like, but I'll give you an example. And I want to talk a little bit about this versus what you're looking at in front of you, and I'll do that in just a second.
Does it say like you're not allowed to look at it? Yeah. That's what my friend said too.
Those of you that have two or more two majors, you will not be able to look at your degree evaluation. You were never able to look at your degree evaluation when you have more than one major. Okay, so when you go to your web portal and you log in, you'll go to your degree evaluation. what it'll do is it will automatically reroute you, or give you the link to reroute you. So you don't have to do this on yours, but I have different settings, so I have to do this on mine. So when you log in and you try to look at it, you'll be redirected, so you'll click, and then you put in your SDSU ID without the @SDSU. So it's just what your SDSU ID is. Now, my password is the same password for the network, which, yes. Oh, that's not helpful. Thank you. All right, let me back up. Okay, so when you click on your degree evaluation, it will lead you here. So it'll say click here, and this is going to lead you to the new evaluation. And what you'll want to do is you put in your SDSU ID without the @sdsu.edu. And then, like I said, my password is different than what it was for the original web portal. It's my network password. And it also just had me change my password pretty recently, so that might be the issue. I heard somebody earlier say they reset their password and it worked. Is that true?
Oh, I did that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like couldn't remember, so then I reset it.
you reset it and then it worked?
And then I realized you could put the and then.
Where do you reset
Like where you put in your red ID? I didn't like.
No, you're not going to. My settings are different because I have access to everyone's degree evaluation. Yeah, no, it'll well, not everyone, most people. It will, when you click on it, it's already within your password and setup, so you shouldn't have to redo it, yeah.
Can you give us, show us an example of like the in progress? Because I know on mine, like it doesn't show in progress.
Well, it does, so it's kind of hidden. So I'll do this real fast. Just so everyone's aware, this is not what we're going to be showing students at orientation, because we can't print this. There's no way to print this. So we will talk about it, we'll mention it, that students will have access to it. In order to run the in progress, you come down here to where it says undergraduate student in progress degree evaluation, click here. And then it says select IPSS report type. So you select it, and if you have in progress, this test student of ours does not, but you view the audit. And if you have in progress coursework, it'll appear in blue.
Yeah, so mine doesn't. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, neither did mine.
And you clicked on that underneath it.
I think so.
Try it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for the script, the presentation script, how would we explain their degree evaluation?
So, yeah. So let's switch gears. This was mainly for your guys' information.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So during the degree requirements presentation, just like we used to talk about the difference of what the student could see in their web portal. So mainly the difference between a printed copy and what the student sees on their web portal is that the web portal version is a web-based, so it looks different, and it's color-coded. So if the requirements still need to be completed, it's in red. If it's done, it's in green. So when we talk about the new degree evaluation, obviously we won't say new because this is all the students will know. We'll just mention that, you know, typically it's first day of classes for freshmen. For transfers, it's sometime during the first semester because we have to reconcile the record. We'll mention it and we'll say, you know, the document that they're looking at is really designed for orientation. It's for that day. we don't want them just to toss it, but we don't want them to just rely on that. Once school starts, we want them to really realize that they have access to their degree evaluation and that it's a live document. So when they're looking at it online, they can check it every single semester. They don't have to rely on the original copy that they got at orientation. Because of the programming, we can only, because we have to run them in batch jobs, we can only do this printed version. So if you were to come into the Office of Advising and Evaluations and we print your degree evaluation, this is what it looks like, what you're looking at. But what you have access to in your web portal is obviously looks different. I think it's a little easier to read. And it's really what we do want students to rely on. It's the same information. It's just set up differently. Does that make sense? Okay. So what we're going to do is go through the printed copy, because we do need you to be, pretty fluent with what the printed copy, how it's set up, what it looks like. Really, the difference is it's 2 columns side by side versus just being one sort of streamlined column, right? Because it's not a web-based document. But again, it's the same information. It's set up in the same order. And this is the one that we need to get used to looking at in regards to knowing how to read it to help the student personalize their map and interpret how to set up their schedule. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So we're just going to start at the top of it. So we're looking at the management major. And I know it's pretty blurry, so just follow along on yours. And just raise your hand if you have questions. So at the very top is going to be the student's information. So their name, red ID, what their major is, what type of degree it is, and the major catalog year. So for all new student orientation students this summer, their catalog, GE catalog and major catalog will be 2019. So we will be in the 1920 catalog. On the left-hand side is a description of the degree evaluation itself. So it kind of explains what this is, which is basically a tool for students to track their progress towards graduation. That's what a degree evaluation is. We then give some contact information. So we have the contact information of Advising and Evaluations, because we're really the go-to people if you have questions about anything on this document except for major advising questions. And then we list where to find your major advisor information. Underneath that is a legend. So if you come over to column 2 on the first page on the right-hand side, you see a legend with, so the first couple of things you see is the word no, a minus sign, an okay, and a plus sign. So every box after this legend, every box on this represents one of the 9 graduation requirements. So it's just like the catalog, right, where it has the 9 graduation requirements, except it's unique to the student. So unlike the catalog that just lists all 9 graduation requirements, this lists all 9 graduation requirements and where the student is at with each of those requirements. So you'll probably remember from the catalog, a lot of our requirements of these 9 have sub-requirements. So if you see one of these boxes and you see the word okay, that means that that requirement is completed, it's done, we can move on. If it says no, that means the requirement is not complete. If it has sub-requirements, you might see pluses or minuses. The minuses are the pieces that still need to be complete, and the pluses are the pieces of that requirement that are done. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Okay. The rest of this legend, you can see it has a bunch of different letters and codes. So this basically breaks down how the classes on your degree evaluation are being treated. So if a student sees a class and maybe they took a course and they don't understand why they're not getting credit for it, there'll be one of these codes next to it. So they'll need to come back to this legend in order for it to understand what's happening to it. If it doesn't have a code, that means you don't need to refer back to this legend. Okay, so what happens next is we start the actual requirements. It just so happens that it starts with requirement number 1, which is the competency requirements in mathematics and writing. So in this case, this student is a management major and they are missing their math competency. So you can see that their written communication assessment has been satisfied, because there's a plus sign, and their math has a minus sign, which means that they need the competency. So that's going to be the student's sort of first, like, oh, I need competency. Then it lists out, for non-STEM majors, it lists out the pairs of courses that are available. If you flip to page 2, it then also tells you what the STEM major options are. The next up is what happens to be graduation requirement number 2, and now it'll stop going in order from here on out. Wait, is that number 2? Yeah. So the GWAR. So when we're doing the requirements presentation for freshmen, we kind of gloss over this. We just mention that there's, when they're a junior, they'll take an exam. That score on that exam will tell us more information. Or we just simply say, the GWAR is a requirement for juniors. For transfers, we obviously explain a bit more. And why would we do that?
Because they can't take it.
Yeah, because transfers have to take the WPA their very first semester because they're coming in as juniors. So obviously we go into it a little bit more. Once the student takes the WPA, and there'll be an example of this with the transfer degree evaluation I've prepared, it will tell them, based on their score, what they need to do. So it'll either list specific courses, again, depending on their score, or it'll list, well, we'll dive into that when we get to the transfer degree evaluation. All right, next up is American institutions. So we see a note here, and now we see 1, 2 on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, 3 minuses. So remember that there's 3 sections of American institutions. So American history, United States Constitution, and California state and local government. And remember, 2 courses can clear all 3 requirements as long as they're the correct 2 courses. So this is where, remember how in the catalog it only shows you pairs? And I mentioned that when we get to the degree evaluation, it's a little easier to understand what's required. So for example, you can see under American history, just as an example, History 109 is listed. And then if you go to the United States Constitution, you see that it's also listed there. So that tells us that one class clears both of those requirements. And then the student, so once they take, let's say, that course, both of those will change to plus signs. So these would change from minuses to pluses. And then the student is left with a no. They're looking for the minus. And then they know that if they take any course from this list, that will satisfy that third part of the component. Good so far? Okay. Next up is all of the unit, residence, and GPA requirements. So those are all located in this one box. So it tells you what the minimum required for the bachelor's degree is, and if you have any earned, it'll list it, and then tell you how many more you need. It tells you the minimum upper division units required, and how many you still need. And then it gets into some of the different residency requirements. And then it talks about GPAs. Good so far? Okay. And then it starts general education. So it tells you that you're about to look at general education requirements for the catalog year of 2019. So if you were looking at a printed version of your own, it would say what your catalog year for your general education requirements are. It first starts to talk about general education unit requirements. So remember, we talked about there's a specific set of units that are required within GE. It reminds you that no more than 2 American institutions can apply to general education. It tells you the minimum general education units, which is 49. Bless you. It talks about the upper division GE. It reminds you that you cannot take these before completing 60 units. And then it tells you how many are required. Okay, moving on to the next page. So now we start with the lower division GE first. So we have the communication and critical thinking. So we have a no, and in this case, the student doesn't have anything completed yet. They have 3 minuses. So then we move on, and then we start the foundations. So first, we have the natural sciences and quantitative reasoning. And again, the student just has all the minuses here. Underneath that is the social and behavioral sciences. So to back up, it's going to tell you at the front of each column what's required, and it will also tell you if you can't use credit, no credit, because there's certain parts of GE you cannot use credit, no credit. So like, for example, it says complete a total of 9 units. So you need 1 course for each of the 3 areas. And then down here, you need 1 course from each of these areas. For social and behavioral science, it says complete 3 courses from a minimum of 2 different departments. It reminds you again that no more than 2 American institutions can apply to general education. It gives you the list, and it's important to remember, like, if you're looking at your web portal version, or even if you print a new one after you complete a term, if you take, let's say, Econ 101 and 102, they'll appear on first and second, or first department and then additional course, but they're not going to disappear from this list, and it says that. It says as courses are completed, they are not removed from the list above. So the student just needs to read and remember that they'll need 3 courses altogether. And again, it states in the beginning of every of these sections what it is you need from that area. Any questions so far? Okay. All right, and then beneath that, there we go, is the foundations, arts, and humanities. So it tells you what you need. Select 3 courses with a minimum of 1 course from each area. So we have the arts and we have the humanities. So it's 1 from the arts, 1 from the humanities, and then 1 from either the arts or the humanities. Same deal. Once a student takes it, it's not going to remove it from that list. They can't take the same course over again, right? And then here's area E, which is the lifelong learning and self-development. So 1 course from there. Any questions? All right. Next page is the upper division GE explorations. When can students take these?
After they complete the units.
Sorry, I can't hear. Did somebody answer?
Upper division.
When they're achieving 60 units, or after they've achieved 60 units. And we put that as many places as we possibly can. So here it is listed yet again. So with freshmen, we don't really go into this. We just say, you know, these are your upper division GE that you'll take when you can start when you're a junior. Yes.
I'm sorry. Going back to foundations, arts and humanities, when it says 3 courses with a minimum of 1 from each section, so it can be 2 classes from humanities and 1 from arts, or 2 from arts and 1 from humanities.
Yeah. So it's a total of 3 courses, and it's 1 course from each of the 2. So 1 and 1, which would be 2, and then your third one can come from either 1 or 2. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you just can't take all 3 in one area and be done. Any other questions on that? Okay. Okay. So then after the upper division GE is where the major starts. And again, it's going to tell the student what their catalog year for their major is. It talks about the impacted program. It lets them know that they're currently in a pre-major status, reminding students that they have to meet all impacted requirements before being able to go into upper division. And it gives them information about where to find a bit more information about that, the website. And then it starts with the preparation for major. And then underneath that will be the upper division major. So during